Our gospel reading today may seem rather straightforward and routine, one that we've heard before. Obviously, we should love God and we should love other people. But I think there might actually be a lot to read into what Jesus says to us. So we've got this ancient practice here that we see in this gospel reading of scribes and Pharisees of the law asking teachers their opinions. So this isn't necessarily an attempt to trick Jesus up or to trap him. And you can see that Jesus doesn't ridicule the questioner at all in this gospel as he has in weeks past. It might have been an authentic question. And it rather was a question for debate back in that time as to which law is the greatest. So it was sort of normal for people to ask a teacher, which Jesus was a rabbi teaching in public at this moment, what his opinion was, what the greatest law was, and why he thought that. It was up to the teachers to kind of make sense of the whole system of laws, not just to know the laws. So that's what this man is asking Jesus. What do you make of these laws? What's the point of this whole system? And you can see Jesus answers that question perfectly. The whole point of all the systems, of all the moral laws, of all of the reasons that we try to follow any rules at all is to love God, and out of love for God to also love those around us. I think it's no accident that Jesus says that we have to love God with our whole heart, mind, and soul. Jesus doesn't speak in coincidences. He had something to say there. And so I just kind of want to examine those three things briefly with you. So to love God with our whole heart, what exactly is our heart? Well, in Christian theology and philosophy, typically the heart is recognized as the seat of desire. It's the place where we experience our desires. In a certain sense, it's kind of the center of all our experience. And so to speak, to love God with our whole heart means that He is the one thing we desire most. That everything we do, every love we have, derives from that love of God first and foremost. Right? We know that God is the fulfillment of all our desires. And so to recognize Him as the root of all our desires, that the reason there are any desires in our heart in the first place is because God placed them there in order to lead us back to Him, means that we should be willing to put any other desires second to Him. We should be willing to defer any other goodness to that desire we have for God. It should be the motivating factor in our lives. To love God with our whole mind. We know that God is goodness Himself, that He is goodness and truth. Do we actually act as if we want to know Him more? See, that there's a lot to learn about God, and the more we learn about God, the more we actually have the capacity to love Him. I think that in our contemporary world, we have this idea that knowledge is cold and useless, and that emotions and knowledge are almost totally exclusive, and so that a love would really have nothing to do with how much you know. But that's not the case. These things always go together. You can't love what you don't know, and the more you know something, the more you can actually love it. Do you spend time actually learning truths about God, or do you rely on misconceptions or falsehoods about Him? Do you have a perception of God that is more rooted in a servile fear, a fear of punishment, or a fear of just trying to get rewards from God? Or do you treat God as a vending machine, as something that you just go and ask what you want from Him? Or do you know that God is a person who loves you, and do you spend time actually trying to know Him more? We have to love God with our whole mind. Emotion is not enough to depend on. And to love God with your whole soul. Your soul really is the principle of your life, right? At death, a soul leaves a body, and once a soul has left a body, it's no longer a person. It's just a dead body. To love God with your whole soul means that you love Him with every fiber of your being. It's who you are, right? It's intellect and will, it's heart and mind and soul. Soul being the place where our virtue resides as well. In other words, do your habits reflect your love of God in your life? Do your vices predominate a lot of your activity, or does your virtue show that God really is the center of your life? To love God with our whole soul is to love God in a way that is supernatural, not just natural, right? We don't just love Him in worldly things and in worldly actions, but we love Him recognizing that He is the source of grace and divine life. We're called to love God in a supernatural way that goes beyond the love that we're capable of on our own, which also means that the first step is to receive love from God. We can't have supernatural love if we don't first receive it from the source of supernatural love Himself. Supernatural means it's above our own human nature. So we have no source of that in ourselves unless we receive it from God. And obviously all of these things coming to love God better and coming to love goodness means that we come to love those around us. To love another person is to will the good of that person. That's what Aquinas tells us, that love is willing the good of the other. And we can't truly will the good of the other unless we love goodness itself first. Rather, unless we love goodness himself first. And so to love God means that we desire him above all things, and in turn, we desire him for other people as well. So I think that's what Jesus means when he says to love God with our whole heart, minds, and soul, and that's really what makes sense of the entire system.